Okay, it's been quite a while since I've done a video now. I think it's been about I'd say 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks since I did the box office video, which I quite enjoyed. Didn't do very well. I think it only got like 20 views, but we're still a small starting out channel, so I'm not expecting too much, especially on a video like that. That's a very niche topic that a lot of people aren't going to find much interest in. So I'm not expecting it to like blow the bottom doors or sort of situation. But this one, I'm hoping that it'll be a lot more popular, just given the fact that people can or people enjoy watching these videos about like, oh, here's someone's top 10 list. And I also feel like with my list, I'm coming into this hoping and I'm of the opinion, even though I haven't read anyone else's top 10 lists yet, I'm of the opinion that I think my list is going to be quite different to some other people's. There are a couple films on this list that I'll start off by saying there are a couple on this list that I'm choosing to include because they came out in the UK in 2024, but they were technically 2023 films in Canada and the US. So there are probably, if you're watching this in the US and Canada, there's probably a couple films that you're going to go, why is that on there? That came out in December 2023 in the US. But in the UK, we tend to not see a lot of those December releases until the start or the end or the middle of January. So I won't spoil what those are. You'll see them as they come. You'll see them very quickly, actually, because number 10 is one of those films. But yeah, I think my list is going to be quite different. There's a couple on here that I don't think people will consider putting on their lists, but a couple of them where I've gone like, that film to me is really, really excellent in what it's trying to say, what it's trying to do. From start to finish, I just think some of those films that I've put on there deserve a lot more recognition than what I've seen them get, or at least have seen them get at, the box office, or maybe in the award season, because we're now in the award season. I'm recording this the day after the Golden Globes, and I don't think the ones that I'm looking at now got particularly much, if any, sort of success at the Golden Globes. But I will also say I could give a fuck about award shows. So I sort of look at the Golden Globe, like who won the awards, and I just sort of briefly watch it. I watched Carson Runkeist's video about it. But it's one that I sort of like have on whilst I'm writing my notes for this video. It's not one that I'm going like, oh, who won the Golden Globes? I care so deeply about this. I don't really care. It's not that deep. Especially if it's a Golden Globe, it's definitely not that deep. They're basically sat in what is a glorified fucking hotel room, or like ballroom in a hotel. I don't really care who wins these things. I don't really care who wins the Oscars, but at least, that has the prestige. And, that is the thing that you see on, Blu-ray covers, DVD covers. So I probably will tune into that. I have an idea for a video that maybe I want to do about if the Oscars is going to change and evolve into something more, then what does it need to do? And sort of digging into that, doing a lot of research on, has it evolved in the past? Has it changed in the past? And what does it need to do to sort of broaden its horizons and sort of bring a lot of viewers back that haven't been there for a long time? Because, Oscars are seeing record low levels. But that's a video for the future. I didn't, I'm not factoring in with these videos like, oh, could this win an Oscar? Or has this won a Golden Globe? That means nothing to me. Ultimately, in these or in this list, all that mattered is, did I enjoy it, and would I recommend it to someone else? I would say with pretty much every one of these films on the list, I can probably think of someone that I would go, oh, I think you would enjoy this. Because, either this was you when you were younger, or, a political topic, or a historical topic you have interest in. So I think this will be perfect for you. so that's what I bring into it, and also just what films have I thought about the most since watching, and then also one thing that I think gets underrated because I think people are loath to say this, but the runtime is something that I've factored into my thinking with a lot of these films. Not just I'm not saying, oh, this is too long, so you go lower down, you go 10th. But what I factored in is, okay, this film is an hour and a half. Does it reach its point completely? And am I able to fully understand what its point is that it's conveying in that hour and a half? Or could it have actually done with, say, 15, 20 minutes more? On the other hand, films that are 2 hours 15, say 2.5 hours, could that have come down a little bit or even a lot, and the film would have felt, either better or just the same as what it is now? Because if your film is 2.5 hours, and then I say to you, okay, well, I'm gonna recut your film and I'm gonna make it 2 hours, and both films are identical, then in my opinion, your film should be 2 hours. You can have a director's cut and put that on the Blu-ray and put it on your streaming services as a super fucking, I don't know, premium bonus on the high end of the subscription tiers, if that's what you want to do. But if it's the same film at 2 hours and 2.5 hours, I think you should make it 2 hours because that makes it more manageable for audiences. It broadens the scope of who is going to see your movies, because less people are likely to see a 2.5, 3 hour movie than people who are likely to see a 2 hour movie. And then also, I just think there is something to conveying your point as concisely as possible and not making your audience feel as if you're wasting their time. If that extra half an hour, that hypothetical extra half an hour that I'm talking about in this, well, hypothetical, like I say, if you don't convey any pivotal and critical information, then you are wasting your audience's time. And that should drag down your movie. As much as a film being too short and it feels like it needed to explore certain elements more, a film exploring its elements too much and not just limiting its scope to critical information, that's two sides of the same coin, and that coin is flawed. And finding that peak balance where you go, okay, this is long enough that I'm able to convey my point and explore what I want to explore, but it's not too long that it's going to make people tune out and, check their phones, talk to the person next to them, that sort of stuff. That's a delicate balance, but I don't think we should just go, oh, well, it's 2.5 hours, but it could be 2 hours 15, but I enjoyed that extra 15 minutes, so who cares? Well, the person who would have seen this movie had it been 15 hours shorter, or 15 minutes shorter, sorry, that matters to them. And I'm not saying to cut out critical information from your movie just for the sake of broadening, broadening your horizons and reaching a member of the audience that wouldn't have previously been there. But if that's a person you want in the seat, if you want that bum in the seat, and it's someone that you feel like this story should resonate with, then you should want it to resonate with them. You should want the length of your movie to be perfect for that person. Now, not everyone is going to love it. Not everyone is even going to like it. But how do you maximize the scope of your audience is a critical thing. And I do think to some extent with streaming services we're losing that, as obviously I talked about in my Why Are Movies So Long video. I feel like we're losing that, and films are just going, great, I can do whatever I want. I want to be 3 hours, 4 hours. And of course there is scope for movies like that, but there are also a lot of movies that are coming out that should not be that long, and don't need to be that long. I think there are two films, one more so than the other on this list that I'm going to talk about. It's lower on my list because I just feel like it's too long. It doesn't need to be as long as it is, and that did drag it down for me because it affected the pacing of the movie. But anyways, I've talked about this enough at length. I've gone 11 minutes and we're not even in the first one yet. So I imagine I'll probably come back to this point. Well, I will come back to this point when I reach those films that I'm talking about. But yeah, okay. Number 10. Number 10. All of Us Strangers. So this is the Paul Mescal, Andrew Scott film that came out in January of 2024 here in the UK. It is one that I think came out in 2023 December in the US and Canada. It's and I should also say all these films that I'm going to talk about are going to be spoiled. Don't come here with an expectation that this isn't going to be spoiled. It will be. So this film is about a man played by Andrew Scott. I've forgotten the names as well. I should say that, but so I'm just going to refer to them as their actors' names. So Andrew Scott he's playing this lonely, isolated writer, and Paul Mescal is playing his counterpart, who is also sort of this lonely. Well, you don't really find out what he is, but he's basically this other lonely guy, and they're living in the same apartment building. Andrew Scott's character throughout the film is reflecting on his relationship with his parents, who died when he was young, and Paul Mescal essentially is there to sort of he's sort of this promise or this opportunity of a new potential homosexual relationship between Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal. I would say one of the great things about this film is that the relationship between Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott, I just believe it so completely. They just bounce off each other, really well. Neither of these characters are particularly happy, and when they're on screen together, they both come across as we're both miserable people who are attempting to not be miserable, and that's why we're together. And yet, you see by the end of the film, they don't succeed. Both of them die, along with his parents also being dead. But that relationship, I really think, is completely believable, as are the relationship that he has with his parents, who are played by Claire Foy and Jamie Bell. What I will say is, although I have just said that the relationship between Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott is completely believable, on the other hand, I enjoyed the scenes so much between Jamie Bell, Claire Foy, and Andrew Scott, or any two of those together. Sometimes Andrew Scott's character is just on scene with one of the parents rather than both of them. I enjoyed those scenes with his parents so much that he's having these conversations in his subconscious, essentially. I enjoyed those conversations and those scenes so deeply, where he's having conversations about him being gay. He's having conversations about the night they died, about their final Christmas together. Even more basic stuff like, oh, the weather, oh, you're wet, come in, I'll get you dried off, I'll get you a spare pair of clothes, things like that. All those conversations are so believable, and they're so authentically real, that I almost felt a bit disappointed when I was watching Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott on screen together. And I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, well, I would have just preferred it if he wasn't in the movie whatsoever. Just cut those scenes and make it about the parents. Because I understand why that relationship is there. It's this promise of a different or a future, but he has to let go of the past in order to reach that. I understand that, and so I'm willing to accept that. I just preferred one set of scenes over the other. I don't think any of the performances or any of the scenes are necessarily bad in any way. I think everyone in the film is pretty good. I think my one issue with the movie is that I just don't really like the very, very ending. If you've seen the ending, you know what I'm talking about. Essentially, you see that Paul Mescal's character is dead, and Andrew Scott's character, climbs into bed with him, and then you see essentially the final scene of them in bed together. Sort of, the camera pulls out and out and out and out away from them, and it ends on a picture of the universe, and you're essentially meant to think like, all right, well, Andrew Scott's dead, Paul Mescal's dead, and also the parents are dead, so this is a pretty miserable film. No one has succeeded in this. Everyone has ended up alone, pretty much, not being with the person that they wanted to be with. My issue with it is, whilst in one sense, I understand that ending, I get what it's going for. This idea that, isolation and not reaching out to others will inevitably lead us all down this, path of isolation and being miserable and melancholy and depression and that sort of thing. I get what it's going for. On the other hand, the idea of this camera pulling out and, oh, he's dead as well, it just makes it feel whimsical, and it feels like this film is in 2023 or 2024, sorry, is doing like it was a dream all along. This is the end of the movie, so we're gonna put the end on it. It feels like something like that, where I'm just like, okay, that's a bit weird. That's a bit outdated. I'm not. It comes off as whimsical to me. It sort of trivializes what I've been watching in my mind, and maybe people disagree with me on this, and they, other people will say like, oh, I actually think it's perfect. But in my mind, this film is incredibly grounded and is just simply a man who is going through his memories of his parents. He's dealing with that in his subconscious. He's created this relationship with this man that he's had one interaction with. And yet the ending sort of just happens because I don't feel like the script knows where else to go. Like, if you don't have that scene where, you're sort of shown that he's dead, if it's not that, then what else is it? And I actually think if it was something else, that would be more bold, because I think presumably it would be, okay, he finds out he's dead, and then, oh, well, life continues anyways, and you see him just going about his day. Maybe you see him starting a new relationship, or he finds a prospect and he goes, oh, what about this person? So that does pull the end, or it does pull the film down for me. I don't feel like anything in this film is bad. When I got the ending, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not really a fan of that. But like I say, I could understand other people enjoying it. It's just not one that works for me, personally. But as I am going to also get into, I feel like every film on this, not every film, but I feel like film number 7 through to film number 10, that I'm pretty malleable on them moving around. Number 1 and number 6, I'm pretty confident on, okay, this is it. This is where I feel like each of these films should go. But 7 to 10 is where I'm like, that's probably, I could see number 10 being number 7, number 8 being 10, or being 7 another day. And so I'm not particularly like, oh my god, this film was the best thing I've ever seen about any of these upcoming films, these next 3 upcoming films, and also number 10. Once I get to number 6, that's when I'm going to be like, yeah, this film is the shit. That's when I really get into like, oh, this is what I really enjoyed, and these other films where I'm like, no, this is definitely one of the best films of the year for me. But anyways, number 9, Conclave. So Conclave is Ralph Fiennes, John Lithgow. Who's the other guy? Is it Mark Strong? I think it's Mark Strong. I am Googling. No, it's not Mark Strong. Who's the other guy? The other bald guy. Stanley Tucci. I always get those two guys confused. So yeah, it's Ralph Fiennes, John Lithgow, and Stanley Tucci, and Isabella Rossellini, I believe her name is. They form the cast of this Catholic Church choosing the next pope, and it sort of takes you into the manipulative sort of backstabbing political nature of the sort of nature of choosing a new pope. It shows you that it's not purely a religious decision, as Ralph Fiennes' character would like it to be. It is actually this sort of deeply flawed human process where certain people want to see their person or themselves be the guy, and it's a film that I think is more interested in the politics of it than it is the religion of it, and that's fine. I think it is really, really good. It is really, really effective in what it's trying to do. It's definitely, for me, it's definitely one of the most interesting and different thrillers in a long time. It's not, a high stakes Liam Neeson thriller like Taken. It's not I don't know, what's another thriller like Jason Bourne. It's not that sort of spy thriller, that sort of movie. It's not a James Bond, nothing like that. It's just quiet, thrilling conversation where you're sort of tasked, and the director and the actors on screen sort of trust you to sort of deduce what's going on and what the intentions are behind everyone involved in these scenes. The film is so interesting. Like, very rarely will you see anything taking you inside this process. And of course, it's dramatized. Yes, dramatized. So, you can't necessarily say like, this is the real process. But it sort of conveys what we as humans would assume the process is like, that the people involved in this are not just religious, devoted to God people. They have their politics, they have their beliefs on what humans should be, whether that be, one of the characters believing that marriage is between a man and a woman, one of the characters believing that the entire Catholic Church should be conducted in Latin, there should be no other language present in the church, and then other characters being more progressive and forward-thinking. I think that this film conveys what we believe probably goes on inside the walls of the church. It's not necessarily about the process, the deep I can't say the word, mechanizations of the process. You're not going to watch this film and go like, oh, that's definitely how the Pope is chosen. None of the characters you're going to think like, oh, that's that Archbishop, because you're not going to know any of the Archbishops. This movie is much more, in my opinion, a template for exploring, the different facets of human nature and what humans tend to believe, and how humans form these tribalistic groups, and how humans seek power, and then other humans don't seek power but are still tempted by it, and how those same people who don't seek it end up being the people who are sometimes put in positions of power precisely because they are the ones who don't want it. and so sometimes they are the best leaders. Now, despite the fact that I find this film so thrilling and so like utterly interesting, I do have to say that the ending itself is going to be one that I am still unsure on. I can't decide whether it is really, really out of the blue, which is sort of what I feel. But on the other hand, I also understand the conclusion. It is one that, despite it being out of the blue, I understand why they've gone that route, particularly in the modern sort of political landscape of America, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, places like this. I can understand why the topic that they chose to go down. So it ends up being that the Pope that they've chosen, they believe, is just a man, but instead this person is a hermaphrodite. So I'm not entirely sure how they identify by the end of the film, but for all intents and purposes, for the entire film, you do believe this is a man. And it's only that you find out that they've had a, what is it? Is it a hysterectomy, I believe that the character says they have. It's only then that you find out, like, that's not entirely true. And it's one that you'll go like, oh, well, that's the film being political, and that's the film taking something out of the real world and just inserting it. Or you'll go, well, actually, this is a film about human nature, and this is a topic from present day. And so if this is about how do we choose a new pope in the modern era, this would just be a topic that gets brought up. So I understand it. I'm just not sure how I feel about it, is how I would describe that. However, this is a film that I think is so good that if I end up going back and watching it, which I probably will pretty soon because I did really enjoy it, and there is a special screening coming up at my local cinema with the screenwriter. If that ending does end up growing on me, I do think that this film could end up a lot higher on the list. It could end up, I could see this being like 5th or 6th. I don't think it's better than anything higher than that. But if I go back and watch it and go, oh no, I feel completely great about this ending. I think this completely makes sense. It's developed enough in the world and through the screenplay that I'm completely fine with this. Then, for all intents and purposes, I'd be willing to put this a lot higher. I'm just not willing to put it that high yet because I don't know how I feel about the ending. But yeah, it's one that I would really recommend. It almost is like, for people that like spy movies, this is almost like that, where it's the conversations that, you know, the CIA analysts have in the boardroom. It's those conversations, but for the entire 2 hours. And if you just took out the action and the, you know, the killing and the like, oh, we're gonna go and fucking, I don't know, steal this document or this virus or whatever. It's those conversations just without the action. And so if you're into those spy movies, I think this is almost a film for you. But yeah, I could see this getting a lot higher, but I'm pretty confident in where it is right now. Next, number 8, The Substance. I think The Substance is a seriously good movie. I really, really, really enjoyed it. It's, well, hang on, let me back up. So the film is Demi Moore, Dennis Quaid, and Margaret Qualley. So Dennis Quaid plays this agent, and Demi Moore plays what I would say is, she's the, oh no, sorry, he doesn't play an agent. He plays like a studio head. Demi Moore is this aging actress, 80s pop star who, you know, is sort of told by Dennis Quaid in no uncertain terms. It's never direct her or him telling her that she is too old to do this, but she is made to feel that way, and she's eventually replaced by someone else that's younger, fitter, better looking, or, you know, in quotes, better looking. And she comes across this substance, the substance, that can make her look younger and fitter and more energized. The issue is that eventually her counterpart, who's played by Margaret Qualley, she takes over and gets too into becoming the new version of her, and it's sort of that, like, I think, again, sort of similar to All of Us Strangers. This is sort of back and forth and sort of a fight between the past and the present, or the past and the future, whichever you prefer. I think that the Substance is it's one of the only films where, for the entire time I was watching it, so it's about 2 hours 20 minutes. The entire time I was watching it, I felt physically uncomfortable. Like, the camera work in this film is insane. Like, it's so in everyone's faces for the entire film that I was like, oh my god, please just let me see the rest of this room. Like, that's how uncomfortable it is. And yet, I would have never... I mean, I watched it in the cinema, but if I was at home, I would have never turned this off. I would have never left the cinema. And it's like, it is like outright disgusting, the film. And yet, despite it being like outright disgusting, and, you know, it is quite a serious film. It got actually put in the musical / comedy category at the Golden Globes, which I don't agree with. I don't think it's comedy at all. I think it's pretty comic. I don't think it's a comedy. I think the film is, like I said, I think it's pretty serious a lot of the time. But I came away from the film just going like, Jesus Christ. Like, who came up with this idea? And I know the director is the same person that did that film Revenge about 8-9 years ago, which, you know, is also one of those films where it's meant to be pretty gruesome, I think. It's on my list. I will get around to it eventually, so I can't talk about it too much. But the Substance sort of, like, made me question, like, is there a correct outcome for the situation that Demi Moore's character finds herself in? Like, should she just let Margaret Qualley take over and just have her 15 minutes of fame, but it will eventually kill her? Or should Demi Moore just accept that she is getting old, she's getting less beautiful to, you know, the large... Well, I that feels quite harsh, but the people who she's long desired and had the support of and the sort of admiration or adoration of, she's losing that, and she's stepping into a new world where she is, at least physically and probably mentally and psychologically as well, she is a different person. So what is the correct outcome for her, if there even is one? Is it to just accept that she's getting old and she's in this new world, and that she's not going to have the adoration of the, you know, sort of like the masses? Or is it a sort of like seek out that youthful sort of fame that she had for the longest time, and even though it will kill her sooner, well, at least she'll have that sort of 15 minutes. You know, it's sort of like that question that people have long had of like, well, would you prefer to like shine so bright and then just die off like that? Or would you prefer to sort of have a steady career and just slowly decline, but you'll live to be a lot older and probably be comfortable in your old age? That's not really... I'm not here to sort of answer that question for you, but it is one where if you came away from it going, no, or sorry, if you came away from this film going, well, I think Margaret Qualley should have took the reins and been in charge, I'd be like, all right, well, that tells me what you're about in life. If you think that Demi Moore should have took the reins, or took back the reins, killed off her counterpart and just accepted her fate, that also tells me what you're about in life. And neither of them are wrong. It just tells me what kind of person you are and what you desire and what you sort of the energy you put out there and what energy you want to get back. And for like that sort of deep philosophical discussion that I'm describing, I think this film is probably one of the most interesting films of the year. And I think everyone in it, whether it be Margaret Qualley's sort of egotistical, narcissistic, younger energy, whether it be Demi Moore's sort of like she's vain, but she's like she wants to be desired, and she also like can't let go. Whether it be them two or whether it just be Dennis Quaid's like absolutely mental nature in this film, they all give great performances. And I am happy for Demi Moore that she did win a Golden Globe, especially with her saying that she was once referred to as a popcorn actress, and finally winning this award proves to her that she isn't a popcorn actress, and that sort of label can't tell her what her value is. One of the reasons... Oh, sorry, before I go on to that, the final point I will say about this is that this film is so uniquely stylistic, and it's one of the most stylistic films I think I've seen in recent times. How I would describe it is that the film is grounded in terms of everything is realistic. The film exists in the real world. This exists in LA. It uses, or at least mimics, sort of real world elements of LA. However, it makes everything look unrealistic by sort of amplifying the environment around the characters. And I don't know if I'm entirely describing that correctly, but it's almost like it's science fiction, but it's not like super advanced technology. It's just what you have around you, like now, what you're watching this video on. It's all that sort of stuff. Yet they've just hyper realized everything around you. I don't think I'm explaining that very well, but the most concise way I can say it is it's a grounded world, and yet everything in it looks unrealistic, and it's super off-putting. It made me feel really uncomfortable. The environment itself is one thing that it's probably the main thing that made me go like, oh, I really don't enjoy this. I wish the environment just looked normal in some way. So, small little editor's note, because I don't think I fully explained what I was talking about correctly. I looked up the definition of what I was talking about in this section of the video on the substance, where I'm saying it's based in reality and yet it looks unrealistic. I believe the term that I'm sort of harking after is hyper-surrealism or hyper-real surrealism. So that's when something is based in reality and yet it introduces elements that couldn't exist. So what I mean in this what I mean in this section is that the film shows you places in LA that could be real, and yet there's something markedly unrealistic about how they look. That means that you watch it and you go, I don't know about this. This doesn't look of this world. It doesn't look like it could exist in my reality. It's something else. It's above my reality, or it's separate or different from my reality. I think that's a better explanation of what I'm talking about. I don't want to discuss it any further than that, other than just say you'll understand what I mean about this, the environment looking unrealistic if you watch the film. Obviously, I've spoiled it already, but I would also say just watch the film if you want to know in deeper detail what I mean. But yeah, that's it. Editor's note over. However, as I was about to say, my one issue with the film is that I do just think it goes a bit too long. I think some of the middle section where, Demi Moore is sort of losing her grip on reality, and maybe even the ending could be cut a little bit down, but it's not too much of a bad sort of thing that I was like, oh, it massively draws the film down. I have put it at 8 because I still think it's pretty good. I just think, yeah, I just think it goes a bit too long. I think the film's about 2 hours 20 minutes. I think it probably could come in at about two hours, and I don't think it needs to be as long as it is. I don't think that extra 20 minutes really adds anything, other than it being, purely quite good fun, sadistic, gory fun. But yeah, I will say 8 and 7 I feel are pretty interchangeable. Even as I'm talking now, I feel like the substance could go at 7 and what I have at 7 could go at 8. But I'm not gonna back out now. I'm not gonna change it now. I've done the list. So be it. If I rewatch these films in the future and I want to reorganize them, then I'll just reorganize them in my head and maybe I'll say it in a video. But whatever. Number 7, Anora. Now, Anora, I really, really like. I don't think it's as good as sort of the awards hype. I'll get get into why I don't believe it's as good as the sort of awards and a lot of people in the press have sort of bigged it up as they have. But yeah, so Mikey Madison, who is this New York American actress, she plays a sex worker. She just so happens to speak Russian, and because she speaks Russian, she gets what is the word? She gets chosen, I guess. She gets paid by this son of like a Russian like aristocratic family, and this son pays to have sex with her for her to be his girlfriend for a week, and then that week turns into her being, well, his wife. They get married in Vegas. She becomes his wife, and then his parents, people in inverted commas. That makes it sound like they're the mafia. They're not the mafia, but you get what I'm talking about. They come looking for her, and they force them to get divorced. The film was pretty poignant. I would say that the film has 3 great performances, in my opinion. So it has Mikey Madison, like I said, Yuri Borisov, I believe I'm saying that correctly, who plays sort of this henchman that actually becomes quite important as the film goes on. He doesn't say much. He gives like this quite striking, silent portrayal of this character who Mikey Madison's character, Anora, confides in by the end of the film, and she sort of collapses into his arms, and they find comfort in each other. And then the third performance is Mark Edelstein, who plays Anora's husband, shotgun wedding husband, who he's sort of just this, like, I guess you would call him a frat boy, like rich frat boy who's just never been told no to anything, so he just uses his parents' money on whatever the fuck he wants. I don't feel like anyone in this film is necessarily good enough to win an Oscar, which is what some of the people have sort of touted this as. I think Anora is pretty good. It's not really an issue with the film, but I suppose it's kind of unfortunate for the film, is that there was another movie that came out this year, technically last year in the States and Canada, but there was another movie that came out this year in the UK that deals with sex work, deals with sex in general and nudity, and I just think is way better than Anora, and that will be higher up on this list, obviously. You could probably guess which one I'm talking about, but unfortunately for Anora, it just doesn't. I don't think Anora ever reaches the height that film reaches. I think part of the reason for that is that the film, it's here and then it's there and then it's that and then and I never felt like I was getting a chance to sit down and sort of digest what was going on, and that is sort of the point. Is that these people are leading chaotic lives and they are on a path to destruction. No one leaves the film happy. And yet, I never really felt like the film gave me a second to digest what was going on. However, what I am now going to say is going to contradict that. What I'm going to say is the film, like Substance, is also a bit too long, because the film, I think, clocks in at about 2 hours 15, and about 10 minutes of that film I don't think should be there, because there's a scene or a sequence of scenes that is in the car when they're looking for Honora's husband, and I felt like those scenes went on too long, and I felt like the film actually lost its chaotic nature a bit, and I didn't think that was to its benefit. I actually think that the film was trying to be chaotic, and well, I was going to say tense, but it's not trying to be tense. It's trying to be actually chaotic and comedic at the same time. If the film was trying to be those two things, then actually it should be interested in trying to be as concise as possible while still being able to convey its message. And I think that extra 10 or so minutes actually releases a lot of that sort of, it undoes the pressure valve that, the movie has built up, and that sort of chaotic nature sort of just disappears. And whilst I still really like the movie, I don't feel like it accurately it didn't stick to its pacing enough for me to place it any higher, because either you want me to sort of have a moment to stop and think about what's going on, in which case you need those sort of slower scenes, or you want it to be chaotic and comedic, which I know you want it to be chaotic and comedic, because the entire sort of car scene is comedic, and then you reach that point where I'm going, okay, this is going on for too long, and then it's not really comedic and chaotic anymore, because I'm just like, okay, I've seen enough of this. This is going on too long. And then after that finishes, you get back to this being chaotic and comedic again. And so I was kind of like, all right, you've just wasted a bit of my time here. And I have to dock the movie a few points for it not respecting my time in a way that I feel like really hinders the movie. And I know I'm sort of like shitting on the movie quite a bit here, but I am going to get into the ending in a second, which I do feel like sort of it sort of is a cherry on the cake in a sense, but that cake, has a couple flaws in it. In the ending for me, it really like ramped it back up. Until I got to that ending, I was like, okay, well, yeah, I am enjoying this movie. I don't know if it's one of the best of the year. And then I got to that ending and I was like, all right, yeah, this is pretty good. What I will say is I do think that the ending would be even more effective to me if the entire film is chaotic. The first, maybe hour, she's having a great time. She's got all this money she's able to spend. She's having all this sex, partying, drugs, alcohol, yeah, great, whatever. Then the final hour, it should literally just be this family and their sort of employees just going, no, fuck you, you're going to sign this document and you're going to divorce him. And instead, that 10 minutes just goes on too long, and it makes me feel like, all right, well, now this just straight up is like, why am I watching the same thing again? And if that ending just comes a little bit quicker, in my opinion, I feel like it would be even more effective. And that's not to say it isn't effective, because it is very, very effective. So let's just get on to that now. The ending, I think, if you haven't seen it, essentially, Yuri Borisov's character takes her home. He gives her the wedding ring and basically is like, oh, don't tell anyone. And she takes it and she sort of takes that, in my opinion, how I interpret it, because they don't say anything past this point, she sort of takes it as, all right, he's given me something, so now this is a transactional relationship. I need to give him something back. So she gets on top of him in this car and begins to have sex with him. She then sort of stops. I can't remember exactly what happens, but she sort of stops and then begins to like hit him, and he like pulls her in close and just hugs her, and then she starts crying, and the movie just ends. And whilst the credits are rolling, you just hear the engine of this old car just running in the background. That's a really effective scene to me, and the reason why I feel like that elevated this film to being this high on my list is that it sort of when this isn't just a movie about sex work, this is actually a film that is also about class, because it made it that these two characters, from the first time they're on screen together, are pitted against each other, and then at the very end you're sort of left going, oh no, they should be working together, and using it as a big fuck you to these rich Russians who are essentially taking advantage of them. And that was really effective to me, because what I will say in defense of Anora is that one film that I'm talking about that also deals with sex work that is higher on this list, I don't feel like that film deals with class very much. Anora does, so that separates this film slightly. But in order to get more of that about class, I will have to go back and, rewatch that film and then go like, all right, okay, yeah, I get a lot more of this class that you're talking about. You just didn't make it as obvious on the first watch. That's not the sort of badmouth Anora. That's just to say that maybe the second time I watch it, I think this film could be even more effective once I pick up on those subtle hints to its class theme that I just didn't get the first time. Because I think on the first watch, you're meant to think that this is a movie about gender and this is a movie about sex work, and that's it. I just think that actually this movie is, in my opinion, it's much more about class than the film chooses to make out that it is. And also, people online choosing to just say, oh, this movie's about sex work. And even here, I've kind of said that it's just about sex work, and now I'm sort of going back on that. I think this movie is actually about something a lot deeper. I just don't think the film tells you it's about something deeper until the very end. Because even when the film was sort of mirroring and presenting Anora and Yuri Borisov's character as being equals, you're never really told why. You sort of just see them on camera and go, okay, I don't really know why you're showing me on camera as these two people being equal when he should actually have a lot more power than her. And it's not until the ending that you're really left going, oh, okay, I get it now. But yeah, I do really enjoy Anora. I do think it is really good. I just think it's a bit too long. That's all. And I think a lot of these films that are coming out, or that came out this year, have just been a bit too long. But yeah, whatever. Anora, pretty fucking good. Now, we get onto a film that I feel like this could be one where people actually, I think the next two, I think could be where people go like, that's fucking bold. But I'm ready to defend it, so fuck you. The Wild Robot at number 6. I am not gonna say very much about this film because this is a kid's film and it's just one that I really enjoyed. But essentially, The Wild Robot is this robot gets left on this island. Her programming sort of rewires, and she learns how to be a mother. And this ugly duckling, which is, a very on-the-nose sort of theme, becomes her child. And this fox essentially becomes the dad of the ugly duckling. And I think the film is really bold. I think the film is really heartwarming. the film conveys three different messages: one about the environment, one about parenthood, and one about what it means to be the child of someone. I think it conveys all three of those pretty well, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's heart wrenching, it's a tearjerker, and yet it is really funny. It's perfect for kids and adults, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it's a really great movie in my opinion. But yeah, I'm really not gonna say very much other than to say this movie doesn't outstay its welcome. It's not 2 hours. It's like, I think it's an hour and 40, hour 45, and yet it's able to perfectly convey all three messages, which I think is a major selling point to me on this movie, is that this movie is shorter, and yet in that short amount of time, it is able to succinctly give you three different messages and an entertaining film for everyone who might watch it. I think that's great. Yeah. And then the final film, well, I'm going to do this film and then I'm going to take a break, come back later, do the rest of the list because I don't have time right now. I thought I would, but yeah. Number 5, Dee Dee. I had a fucking great time watching this film. I related to it so deeply because the era that I grew up in was just a bit later. This film was probably set around 2007, I would say. I was Dee Dee's age, so how old is he meant to be? 12? I was 12 in 2012, 2013. So a lot of what he's sort of experiencing with the internet and sort of this diverse group of friends, I was experiencing just 5 years later. And, you know, obviously, I had some experience in I would say 2008, 2009 is when I was having my first experiences with the internet. It's, you know, every like generation, every decade has their own like coming of age set of films. So you know, for like my generation, you've had like Lady Bird, you've had Dee Dee. There's been like mid-80s, 8th grade, but this is the first film that has came out in like that sort of stretch of period or stretch of time, I'd say like 5-6 years, where it's been directly related to things that I can say, oh, that's like my group of friends. That was like my experience with the internet. This is how we talked. And that's despite the film that the film is you know, about a Chinese American family. That's despite the fact that it's set in LA and I'm in, you know, Newcastle in the north of England. And the fact that the film is able to convey its like relatability so effectively to communicate with someone who grew up in a slightly different, or you know, maybe society had progressed slightly more from 2007 to 2012. It's seriously effective to me. That this is the first film where I've gone like, oh, this could be about me. Part of this film is about me. It's about my generation. I have dealt with things like this. I have dealt with that idea of wanting to, you know, well, you use the internet to sort of it be something that you do. As I said, like having friends that talk like that, you know, I'm not going to repeat some of the things that they said in the film, but if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Some of the insults that they use, which, you know, maybe we don't use them these days, but we don't judge. Just gonna say it that, leave it that. And it's another one that I don't think outstays its welcome. It's only, I think, an hour and a half, and yet the film is able to feel like it essentially deals with, you know, the family, one set of friends, another set of friends, and then Dee Dee himself and also, his first experience with a girl. For a film, in this film, in my opinion, to deal with all those things effectively and not feel like it's bogged down in too many elements of this teenager's life, is really surprising and really well done for a film that is the debut of this director. It's really astounding. It's a really, really convincing piece of work that like tells me like, oh, okay, whatever this guy does next, whatever as well the actor who played Dee Dee, I'm not sure what his name actually is, whatever these two do next, take notice, because they're good. And I'm pretty sure this is the guy who played Dee Dee. I'm pretty sure this is also his first acting role, at least in film. I'm pretty sure. So this is a film that, again, I don't want to say very much about it because I think it is just one that I think people should just go and watch. But I will say it's a very effective film about the immigration story, which uses both the English and Chinese language to convey its message that these two generations, or even three generations, are disconnected in some way, yet they are still linked. They still love each other, even if they come from different places, different countries, even all that sort of stuff. It's honestly, I would say this is one of the first. I think this is one of the first films on this list where I go, I really just don't have anything bad to say about it. It's I don't want to use the word perfect because I'm sure I could find something that is imperfect in the film, but I really just don't have anything bad to say about it. I think the film is that good, and it's that enjoyable. It's that, at times it's emotional near the end, and yet it's concise, to the point. It understands what it's about. It's not trying to hammer home anything like for too long. I think this is really, really good. I would really, really recommend this, especially if you're from the early internet age, like I would say I am. Not as early as this, but yeah, it's really good. But yeah, I'm gonna go on a break now. Come back later, do the rest of this. Alright, so I'm re-recording this. I didn't realise, but the audio for the final four films that I talked about was pretty fucked. It's quite low, so I'm gonna re-record this. I don't think this is gonna be very long. I am gonna try and just get through these films. Part of the reason that I'm gonna do it, quite quickly is because I think 1 to 4, all these movies are pretty great. I think I would be comfortable with someone putting any of these 4 films at number 1 or at number 2, number 3, number 4. I don't really. I obviously am like very defensive about what I've put first, what I've put fourth, what I've put 10th. But I think these 4 films in particular are so great. If someone put any of them anywhere else in this top 4, I would understand it. I'm not gonna turn around and be like, what the fuck, why have I done that? It would make sense to me because I think these are unequivocally the 4 best films, in my opinion, that came out in the UK in 2024. So first, not first, number 4 is Poor Things. I think Poor Things is brilliant. I think from start to finish, it has a complete vision. It never really spells out its vision to you. It sells you on its vision without ever instructing you about what it is. You're sort of, well, the film and its director and its actors and its writers and everything else, it trusts you to be smart enough to work out what the film is saying. And this idea of taking this character who is, at the start of the film, a child, and maturing that character all the way to a full-grown adult by the end of the film. and using sex as a way to convey that how that character is maturing as the film goes on, I think is excellent. I think it's so unique in what it's attempting to do. The acting, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, obviously Emma Stone is the best in the film. Margaret Qualley, her brief role in the film is pretty good as well. The film, from start to finish, from top to bottom, your directors of production, or director of photography, sorry, your director, your actors, your extras, your writers, your music, your score, everything else. Everything in this film is great. It fits perfectly. It's everyone on this film works in conjunction to one singular vision, and it comes together perfectly. That you're able to really understand what this film is trying to say about how patriarchy and hierarchy essentially holds women captive in this sort of tight corset, and when women break out of that, how destructive it can be to that hierarchy, but also how freeing it can be to the individuals themselves. It is also, and I am someone who I can be quite critical sometimes of sex and nudity being in films and TV. I think a lot of times it is used unnecessarily, but I think this is one of the very, very few and rare films that uses sex and nudity to its advantage. It justifies its use of both. I never at any point in this film felt like, oh, why is that here? It doesn't make any sense. I think in this film in particular, the nudity makes perfect sense. It is used to suggest how a child, a toddler, a baby, and then a teenager, and then a young adult, and then a fully formed, mature adult has this relationship with its body, and the film perfectly conveys how, as that person grows up, the relationship with their body changes, and who we want to see, or who we allow our body to come under the purview of, and ultimately the purview in terms of like, oh, it should look like this, it should look like that, rests solely on Emma Stone's character. It doesn't, belong to anyone else. By the film, she is very clear on, I am here because I want to be here. You can be here if you want, but you're not going to control me in any way. And that goes for the women and the men in the film, but mainly men, of course. But yeah, I think Poor Things is brilliant. For me, the reason I put it fourth rather than first, second, or third is because I think the three films above it, I just took more out of personally. Which, I'm sure if you're a woman who's doing this, Poor Things, maybe you would put higher because you are able to take more from it because of your personal experience. But the films that I'm about to get into, I just took more from because I was like, oh, I can sort of see that in my own experiences. And the next one in particular changed how I would say I viewed a certain genre of film. So let's get into that now. Number 3, The Zone of Interest. This is such a curveball from what I am used to from cinema in general and from the war genre in particular. I don't feel like you can really go into this film necessarily prepared completely for what you're about to see. The film wants you to be uncomfortable with what you're seeing, because if you're not uncomfortable, then you're sort of just a bystander in what you're seeing. And the film is very deliberate in saying, this could be you, and the only way you can stop it from being you is, the only way you can stop this from being you is if you are very deliberate in your actions to, when you see injustice, equality, or inequality, persecution, prosecution, I can't think of what else I'm missing out. when you see those things, you call them out and you stand against it. And if you are the bystander who just allows it to happen, then you could be this person, and we could all be those people. And it is only by these small acts, and you see one of those small acts later in the film, it's only by those small acts that we can guard ourselves against becoming that sort of banal evil that we see of characters like Rudolf Hoss's wife. Rudolf Hoss is very, even though, in the Nuremberg trials, he came out and he was like, oh, well, I just did my job. I just did what I was told to. He's also very aware of what he's doing. And, ultimately, he knows what he's doing is wrong. Whereas Rudolf Hoss's wife is very much like, well, if it wasn't me, then someone else would take my place. So I might as well just make the best of it. And I don't really care what happens to, these Jews. Why would I care about them? My family are the most important thing. And I think Jonathan Glazer is very much about, like, we have to guard against that sort of behaviour. If we don't, then we will allow ourselves to sort of slowly slide back into that authoritarian, fascist, Stalinist, Maoist, whatever else, sort of behaviour where we just go, anything in the pursuit of profit, ideology, whatever else is necessary. And if that comes at the cost of life and many lives, then so be it. So the zone of interest is interesting to me because it made me consider, like, am I at fault for watching war movies? It makes me consider, like, what is my role in perpetuating war? Because yes, I'm just watching a war film, but then that prompts, studios to go, oh, we'll make more of these because they're popular. And then more of those war movies eventually will wear on, younger, typically isolated characters who don't, people, sorry, who don't have much of in the way of role models. Those people will then see those and go, oh, great, I'm going to go and fight in a war. And so the film very much made me consider as an individual, like, do I have a role to play in that? Should I not watch these films because it's, creating a negative outcome, even if it's not directly because of my contribution to these films? Ultimately, in the long term, there is a chance that, tens of thousands maybe of young, particularly men, are going to fight overseas in some war that, has no real bearing on their lives when they're just sat in their living rooms. And, I don't really have the answer. I go back and forth on, oh, well, it's just entertainment. And then I sort of, on the other hand, think, well, it's just entertainment, but we also are very well aware of the effect that art and media and entertainment can have on the real world. And so in that sense, it seems short-sighted to just refer to it as entertainment. So I'm not really here to definitively give you an answer, but I can say I'm probably not going to stop watching war movies, is probably what I will say. But then the other question that I also, well, actually, there's two more questions. I'll get into this one first. Is the movie sort of forces you to consider what we as individuals and what we as a society are choosing either subconsciously or just sort of like unconsciously. Well, no, sorry, that's wrong. So either choosing to exclude unconsciously, so being unaware of doing this, or doing it consciously. What are we excluding from our zone of interest? So things like in current, modern times, that would be, the Ukraine war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That would be the civil war in Sudan, which is currently the biggest humanitarian crisis going on. That would be the uh, Israel Gaza conflict or Israel Hamas conflict, however you prefer to refer to it. And I'm sure there's other things. Obviously, the Uyghur genocide in China, which I'm not going to earn any money and probably will get throttled in the algorithm purely because I'm mentioning that one. The movie forces you to consider, like, should I be thinking about all these things? Is there one in particular above all else that I need to focus on? Are there reasons as to why I personally am excluding it? Is there reasons as to why we as a society and groups of individuals are choosing to, or even as a tribe, are choosing to ignore this? I think particularly with the Israel-Hamas conflict, I think people in my country and the West in general will be fairly aware of why there is vested interest in portraying that conflict in certain ways. But again, like, this isn't a politics channel. I'm not here to really talk about like the ins and outs of war, but I am here to say this film will instruct you on, we have to care about these things. And again, I'm not really sure I have it in me to care about all these things. That's quite exhausting. But the film does want you to go, okay, maybe I need to think about something other than myself. And that in and of itself is quite a powerful message, even if, in my opinion, the message it's sort of sending is fairly unrealistic. It is fairly idealistic. It's impossible to care about the whole globe. It's impossible to care about things that are going on in space and on the moon. And, there's so much going on, even just within our own lives. I think this message is fairly unrealistic and idealistic, but I understand it and I have sympathy for it. And I think it's a powerful message, and I think the film conveys it quite well. And then the final question, and this is kind of similar, I suppose, but the movie forces you to consider what is out of frame. What is the movie showing, and what is it not showing? So when you watch a film, let's think of another example, a film like Schindler's List. What is Steven Spielberg choosing to not include in that film? Is there things that Spielberg could include that would make Schindler less of a heroic figure in that movie? And are there reasons as to why he hasn't included those things? Or is what he's showing the complete, objective truth of what a great man Schindler was? This is much more of a media and film focused question than the other two that I've started with. But I think it's still, in some sense, I think it's still political and, like socioeconomic and all those sorts of things. I think it's still related to those things because there are reasons as to why people choose to include certain things and choose to exclude other things. And, again, whether it's unconscious or conscious, you can't really say. Only the person who chose to include/exclude can tell you the truth about those things. And then a lot of the time, they won't even tell you the truth anyways. But the zone of interest is so great because it's not specifically giving you the answers to these questions, but it is putting those questions across, and then it's telling you to then go and ask yourself it, and go and ask society it, go and ask your politicians, your big business owners, that sort of thing. And it's not saying you'll get answers. It's not saying you'll even get truthful answers, but it is telling you that you need to question these things. And as a piece of, let's say, artistic film, I think that The Zone of Interest is an incredibly powerful and moving film that I would be lying if I didn't say has touched me and has changed how I view war movies in a significant way. I will forever be watching war movies in a different light and thinking about these questions and thinking about the zone of interest in general when I watch other movies and thinking about, does this movie do enough to sort of portray war as a terrible thing? Does it capture the essence of, World War Two, let's say with Saving Private Ryan? Does it capture the essence of World War Two accurately, or does it portray it as inaccurately? Is it worse than is war worse than what is being portrayed on screen, or is the film sort of making it out worse than it actually was? These aren't questions that I'm ever going to be able to come to conclusive answers to. But again, the zone of interest simply, in my opinion, is saying we as a society and as individuals must ask these questions, or else we'll just go through life ignorant and blind, essentially. Okay, so number 2. Now we get into the 2 films where I'm like, oh my god, I fucking love these 2 films. And I know I said at the start of like this sort of section, like number 1 to 4, I said that I would be pretty comfortable with any of these films being number 1, being number 4. I would understand it completely. What I will say is, with these 2 films, it's not like 1 and 2, it's like 1A and 1B, because I could see, and I'll get into one of the specific reasons why in a second, but I could see these films moving about, and sort of number 2 going to number 1, number 1 going to number 2. In my own personal opinion, I can't see, Poor Things and The Zone of Interest ever topping these 2 films in my own personal rankings and how I view these films. Because these next 2, I really was like, these are near perfect or just are perfect, and they mean, like, already they mean so much to me. Like, I can tell, like, I'm gonna love these for a long time. So number 2, or like I said, number 1B, is Dune Part 2. I think Dune Part 2 is so unbelievably epic. When people have, their Star Treks, their Lord of the Rings, their Star Wars, I can't even think of what else. But when they have those sort of like grand franchises that they go like, oh, this is my thing. I've never really had that. I'm just not a major fan of any of those franchises in particular. I don't really have very many issues with them. I don't think that the writing in Star Wars is particularly great, and I, in general, have just always thought Star Wars was a bit boring, especially because I think at this point in time, a lot of people are rehashing those stories in other products and are doing them better, in my opinion. A lot more refined, a lot more, trim the fat and get to the meat and bones and get to the important stuff. But with Doom Part 2, particularly on my second watch, I was like, oh, I think this is becoming my franchise. I think I'm getting to that point where I go, wow, this is like absolutely epic. Like, and I don't mean like epic, like, wow, really cool, man. Look at this. I mean like, oh, this is, a grand vision. This is an epic vision. This is the Odyssey. This is the Iliad. This is, that sort of scope and that sort of like epic vision. And the only reason why Doom Part 2 is number 2 to me on this list is because I don't think you can really rank Part 1 and Part 2 as being like, oh, they're perfect, they're complete. They're not complete films. They're not complete until we get to Doom Part 3. If Doom Part 3 finishes and it's just as good as these first 2, then I'll be like, alright, yeah, that's great. I love it. And I think overall they are, as excellent as I'm saying. But if we get to Doom Part 3 and Part 3 is a mess and it's shit, then I'm gonna sit here and be like, oh well, I love part one and part two, but part three really messes up the vision, and it will affect how I watch part one and part two. And of course, I can try and put part three out of my mind as much as possible, but it's when you label your films with part one, part two, part three, you are specifically saying this is the same story. You watched part one, yes, but the story isn't finished. You need to watch part two. And oh, you watched part two, but the story isn't finished. You need to see part three. And I'm really hoping that the studio gives Denis Villeneuve enough freedom to just end his sort of trilogy the way he sees fit, which, given that he's said on multiple occasions he doesn't want to return to the franchise, I hope, and well, not hope because I love the character, but I sort of think that he will, and I don't know that what, like, Doom Messiah, the book, I don't have any experience with it, but I can see him killing off Paul to be like, right, that's it, the story's done, no reason for me to return, no reason for Timothée Chalamet to return, this is it, we're done. I I have small nitpicks for Doom Part 2. So one of them is the fact that I think they spend a lot of Doom Part 2 amping up and hyping up the final like fight scene, the like, oh, we're going to war. I think they amp up that scene quite a lot. And whilst I think Paul's fight with Sade Rother is great, I think everyone in that scene is a great actor and they're very good in it. My issue with it is it's not to the level and the scale that I expected it to be. But where the reason why I don't sort of dock marks for the film for that is because I'm expecting that in Doom Part 3 they're going to really go like, oh no, this is the big war movie. And I don't know, but that might be disappointing for the fans of the original books. I don't know, because I don't know how the film goes or how the books go, but I think they're clearly building to that. If they don't do that, I'm going to turn around and go like, well, this is a piece of shit, I don't know why you've done it like this. But up to now, I have to hope that that's what they're doing. But like, let's rattle off like some like the great points. The scale of the film, like how it goes across 3 planets. It covers essentially an entire planet on Arrakis, or Dune. The acting in it, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin. I think everyone in this film is great. It's one of the best acted films of the year. I don't think Timothée Chalamet is going to get an award, and I think that's a serious disappointment. But this isn't the kind of film that the Academy in particular would give credit to and give credence to, because it's a franchise, because it's a sci-fi picture. And also, I will say, it's hard to describe the scene that I'm talking about, but I think Rebecca Ferguson in this film has my single favourite piece of acting I've ever seen, where she talks to the baby in her stomach about, oh, we need to turn them with the prophecy. We need to make these people believe in the prophecy, starting with the week. And her face, the camera sticks on her face for about 30 seconds, and it changes from pleasant and friendly to sort of neutral, I guess, and then she sort of tilts the head forward, and you can sort of see like, oh no, she has ill intentions, and these people probably aren't gonna end up in a better position once they believe in this prophecy that she's talking about. It's very hard for me to describe the scene that I'm talking about, but I didn't spot it until my second time watching it, and I was like, wow, that's great. And I don't think she's in the film enough for how great she is in it, but she's excellent in my opinion. The score I think is epic. It's pretty similar to the first one, I know, but I feel like I'd be lying if I didn't give some credit to it. Um, what else? The film looks great. It looks brilliant. The direction, Denis Villeneuve, I think is the best working director right now. I think he's amazing. I think he's probably been the best working director since Blade Runner, to be honest. Even though I don't really like Arrival. I think it's a bit of a weak point in his discography or filmography. But even then, it's it's better than, I don't know, a lot of directors' best movies. It's still competent. It's not the best, but it's competent. Um, yeah. Overall, I love Doom Part Two. I think it's great, and I'm really excited to see how they round out this trilogy. Okay, so final pick number one, Perfect Days. Perfect Days is pretty much perfect. Um, I don't have basically I don't have basically anything wrong with this film. Uh, the reason, in my opinion, why it's higher than Doom Part 2 is purely because it's complete. There isn't going to be a sequel to this movie. I don't need to wait another year, 2 years, to see how this film concludes, to see how the sequel continues the story or rounds it out. Which isn't a critique of Doom Part 2. It's just to say I can't say Doom Part 2 is perfect until I see if the story is wrapped up properly. With Perfect Days, this is it. It's done. And it's fucking brilliant. This movie sort of came out of left field for me because I knew what it was, to a certain extent. I knew it was about a man who's living simply, and it was about how he was able to find happiness in that simplicity, in his isolation. I didn't know how the film doesn't really have much plot, and it also, in some sense, I think it meanders a lot of the time. That's not a criticism again. It's just to say that it spends a lot of time going, this is his day. Say this is his Monday, then this is his Tuesday, and then this is his Wednesday, and then this is his Thursday, and then no, actually on the Friday, let's say an hour into the movie, something happens where someone appears that he hasn't seen in a long time, and then that changes his routine, and he's forced to come out of this shell that he's built himself. And whilst the film, is sort of, on the one hand, it's saying we should be able to find simplicity in our isolation, in being alone, in, not needing more and more and more, not needing to fulfill this ambition and go out and do everything that we possibly can. Whilst the film is encouraging us to find happiness in simplicity, the film is also saying you shouldn't get locked into that simplicity and that isolation. You sometimes need to break out of it and, go and meet people and talk to people. And, sometimes you'll be able to help them. Sometimes they'll be able to help you purely by interacting. And it's really interesting because I think in the first hour of the film, it's purely about that simplicity and about finding happiness alone. And then in the second half of the film, I think the film does something really brave by going, yes, we are talking about simplicity and we are encouraging you to find happiness in simplicity, but don't just pursue that. You have to also pursue relationships with people. And I can't remember his name in the film. I've already forgotten it. Koji Yakusho's character. Koji's, he's the main actor. He's the protagonist of the film. He very much has become comfortable in just, going to work, reading, and then going to his two places where he eats food and drinks. he doesn't do anything else, and it's purely through these accidental interactions that he has with people that he forces, or not he forces his way, the world forces him to come out of that shell and find more than what he is sort of bargaining for. Um, it's really brave, in my opinion, to have this sort of two-pronged message that I think the second half of that message that I've just talked about, you could potentially go, well, you've just told me to find happiness and simplicity, and now you're saying that's not good enough. And you're telling me that actually I should go out and meet people and, sort of expand my horizons, when you weren't telling me that in the first half. Um, what but the reason why the message is so palatable and why I think it's so effective is that acting of Koji Yakusho is so uh you know relatable. Well, I don't think relatable is the correct word. It's so Koji Yakusho is he's so, you believe the emotions that he's exhibiting on screen. I never was like, oh, he's acting here. He just comes across as a real guy. He's just an average guy who's just going about his life, who just so happens to be touched by two or three people. Um, yeah, I don't have very much to say because the film is very simple in what its message is, and it's not doing anything grand. Like, the reasons why I put Doom Part 2 in the zone of interest and Poor Things so high up on this list is because they have like quite grand visions and epic visions and, sort of genre defining or sort of even genre bending definitions. And yet they're on there for me because they do so much to achieve that. Perfect Days, it's about simplicity, but also the film itself is simplistic. And again, that's not a criticism. That is just to say that the film is sort of even saying to other filmmakers, you don't need to do these grand visions in order to have success, in order to have a good film. In a world where budgets and production costs are sort of booming higher and higher, Perfect Days is sort of that middle ground where it goes, well, actually, yes, those are great, we can have those, but also what about these films that cost, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, and they're a lot more basic in their premise, but, the ability to edit and direct and act and put music together, what if those are the basic key four things of any great project, and all this extra stuff that comes with 100 million, 200, 300 million budgets, all that is just extra stuff that will help, and it's bonus. It'll add and help on top of it, but you need to get these key things right first. And I think I think Perfect Days is seriously good. I remember finishing it and just being like, wow. And I only watched it in December for the first time, and I remember finishing it and going, wow, that's already my movie of the year. Like, I think it's so head and shoulders above even the other films that are like completed and like finished. It's excellent. I would recommend it to anyone who is sort of struggling with this idea that, like, they're not enough and they need to do more and more and more and be successful and, have the perfect wife, have the perfect partner, perfect house, perfect kids, perfect job, and they need to get promoted, get more money, get more objects, more cars, go on more expensive, lavish holidays, all this sort of stuff. It's perfect for those kinds of people who are struggling to do that. It's perfect to just go, well, actually, yes, you can do all that and you can be happy, but also you can find happiness in simplicity. You can have happiness in everyday relationships. You can have happiness on your own. I think this film is, it's sort of an injection in this film industry, this ever ambitious and upscaling the film industry. It's the film that we need. We need more films like these to just go, yeah, we can do that. We can do those ballooning budgets, but what if we can do the other way? And I think this film is great. I would recommend it to basically anyone. I think it's just just amazing. I love it. And it's I would be surprised if, I suddenly am like, oh, this film's shit. I really expected Dune Part 2 to probably be my favourite film of the year. Either that or The Zone of Interest. And for this film to come along in, like, the 11th hour at the end of 2024 and just sort of scoop it out of nowhere, I was really surprised by that. But, pleasantly surprised. I think this film was great. I love it. And, Vim Vendor's back catalogue, I've only seen Paris, Texas, and I think I was probably a bit too young when I seen that to really understand a lot of the themes that he was dealing with. So I'm excited to go back and look through his catalogue. I'm also excited to go back and look through Koji Yakusho's catalogue. I've heard Q is very good, and the character that he portrays in that film seems to be very different from this character. It's two ends of the spectrum in that he plays a detective solving an incomprehensible series of murders. In this, he's obviously just a janitor who is just going about his everyday life. But I've been going for about an hour and 40 now. I said I was going to wrap up these 4 films quite quickly, and instead I've, spent a lot of time talking about them. But, that's what we're all here for at the end of the day. So, thank you for watching. If you got this far, great. Love you. I don't know how you listen to me for this long. I'm going to struggle to listen to me for this long when I edit all this. But, is what it is. Thank you. See you in the next one. Bye.